Hello, my name is Kevin Nugent, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this, the first session in the Baby Communication Awareness Week. And I'd like to thank both Sarah Lamb and Ian Nicol for inviting me to share my ideas or thoughts with you. And first, just let me go and do my screen share, if I may. That's if I can. Here it is. Yes, listening to babies. I'm sure you're not surprised that this is the theme chosen by the Brazelton Centre for our theme this week. And the fact is, I've spent my life, luckily, in the presence of babies for all of my professional life, over 40 years, being with babies and the parents. That is the most transformative moment in all our lives, that moment the baby is born. And I've been lucky to have been guided and led and mentored by Barry Brazelton, who perhaps more than anyone has contributed to the discovery of the baby as a person over the last few decades, the appreciation of the baby as somebody who has something to teach us. And I think it was his respect for babies, respect for parents, that drew me ineluctably into this field. And so that here I am today with this great pleasure of speaking with you about babies and about listening to babies. But what do we listen for? Or how do we listen to them? Do babies have something to teach us, you might ask? Surely, over the course of time, it's been recognized that we are the ones who must teach, socialize, mold, and shape babies. But actually, think about it. The new baby has to navigate a sea of ever-changing information, where very little is ever the same, in a learning experiment that spans everything from what air feels in little babies' lungs, differences between liquids and solids, the taste of milk, between one face and another, experiencing the world without ever naming it. So babies approach the most ordinary object as a universe to explore, a mystery to decipher. The amount of newness in a single minute of a baby's day, think of it, is daunting from morning till night. Every waking hour, babies start interpreting the world, trying to make sense of it, trying to search for patterns. When is feeding time? Sleep time. And these are the things that anchor their lives into a recognizable whole. So as much as we are trying to read the baby's behavior, the babies are trying to read ours, to make sense of our behavior. And I hope today that we'll deepen our understanding of how babies are trying to read us, not just that we are trying to read the baby's lives. Now, the fact is, until recent times, we assumed that babies couldn't see, for example. And we assumed that infants could not think, or if they could, their thought processes were very concrete, immediate, and extremely limited. And we failed to believe that babies had deep feelings, could be hurt, could be traumatized, or in fact, that they could even remember anything from this period. But first, let me just begin, not with a baby, but with an 18-month-old. Here's a little baby in Felix Warneken's lab in Leipzig. And firstly, just to tell you, it's an 18-month-old baby and his mother. They give no instruction. They come into the lab and a stranger enters the lab. And the film is watching the baby's response to the stranger.
Oh. Oh.
Well, I've seen this film many times. What was your response to it for this little 18-month-old baby? Think of it only about 6 months before he was taking his first tentative steps. Look at the way he confidently walks across the floor there, the way he opened the closet with his very precise eye-hand coordination, but also his sense of confidence. He was secure in the fact that his mum was there if anything happened. she would certainly help him. But then the curiosity too. As he looked at the stranger, no words are exchanged, remember. The baby has to decipher, read the cues of the adult, and actually figure out the adult's intentions. What does this adult want? Clearly, the adult needs to be helped. So over and above all these cognitive, social, emotional capacities, we have this great sense of empathy. And in terms of what babies can teach us, think of it for myself, how many people I pass during the course of a day and fail to meet their needs. I may notice them, but do I reach out and help just as this little baby does? Let's take a look once again.
Oh. Oh.
The adult doesn't raise his head. The stranger doesn't make eye contact. The baby can read. Ah, is that what you wanted? He seems to be saying. So really what I took this to say that the child's capacity to engage their caregivers, these really provide the foundation of the development of self-confidence and security, resilience, emotional stability, and readiness to learn. But skills like what we see of this little boy, empathy, civility, resilience, and persistence, these are all essential for later learning, success, and the ability to form healthy relationships. But where do they begin? Let's take another little look at another summary of these first months of life.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
And yes, that's what I'd like to talk about. What comes first, how the foundations are actually built. But first, I'd like to invite you to take a look back on what we've learned about how infants and grow and develop over the last 100 or maybe the last 50 years. I'll begin by looking at how science came to understand the world of the newborn and helped us understand the inner life of the baby so we can have access to that inner life. Of course, it was really Freud, we have to acknowledge, gave us a concept that the early years of life had ramifications for the rest of life, right into adult life, and the degree to which one's needs were met in the oral anal needs for Freud in the early stages predicated the healthy, happy adulthood. And this work, of course, was developed by Anna Freud herself, John Bowlby, Robert Hind, and John Winnicott in England. People like René Spitz, Erik Erikson, Selma Freiberg, Barry Brazelton, Hadley Sells, and Daniel Stern in North America. So by the 1960s, the time I went to work with Barry Brazelton, there was a sort of a great interest in laboratory studies, trying to understand more and more about what babies could do, their perceptual and motor abilities and their sensory abilities. It was really the beginning of the science of baby watching. And in the last 30 years, there's been a revolution really in our understanding the capabilities and the inner lives of babies and toddlers, in particular the workings of the infant brain. Here's the classic iconic phrase of William James, brother, by the way, of Henry. The baby assailed by eyes, ears, nose, skin, and entrails at once feels it all as one great blooming, buzzing confusion. So really was the baby as the blank slate era. But Peter Wolf, psychiatrist, was the first one who moved away from adult therapy, so to speak, to asking parents to remember back, or people remember back their own childhood experiences by actually deciding to look at children, in this case, even looking at babies. He spent often up to 48 hours a day in the old Boston lying in hospital observing babies. And this is what he discovered. Babies' lives was not chaotic. It was quite organized. And he came up with looking at these 6 states of consciousness.
All infants have 6 states of consciousness. State 1 is a deep sleep state. Characteristics include eyes fully closed, no eye movements under closed eyelids, regular respiration, no spontaneous activity except for startles and sudden jerky movements. State 2 is a light sleep state. These behaviors are common in State 2. The eyes are closed, but may briefly open from time to time. There's rapid eye movement under closed eyelids. Activity is minimal. There are random movements, and there is sucking on and off. State 3 is the drowsy state, when the baby transitions from sleep to wake. Indicators of State 3 include semi-dozing, heavy eyelids, variable activity, and smooth movements. State 4 is the quiet alert state. An infant in State 4 shows a bright-eyed look, an invested focus on a stimulus, and minimal motor activity. A baby in State 5 is active and often fussy. Characteristics of State 5 include open eyes, brief periods of fussiness, high motor activity, thrusting movements, and may have spontaneous startles. Finally, a baby in State 6 is not happy. Signs of State 6 include an intense cry and high motor activity.
Actually, you're probably all familiar with these, but for parents and practitioners alike, this provides a remarkable window into the baby's behavior. And I think the end result is that we have to have a deep respect for the baby's sleep states or the baby's alert states, and that all our activities will really be shaped by the baby's, if you like, availability in terms of his or her state.
All infants.
Now, what do we learn from that time on? Shortly around that very time, Robert Vance was the first who really showed that babies could actually see, had clear-cut visual acuity, could distinguish between checkerboard and different forms of checkerboard displays. But also, they preferred the checkerboard display to the one that had less interesting material. So, in other words, babies were not only could see, like people thought at that time, babies could just see shadows, but they were making choices. So from the very beginning, we acknowledge that babies, when they look, they're making choices, who they look at, where they look, how long they look. These are choices the baby makes. They're not reflexive behaviors, but actually intentional behaviors. So the baby's visual choices are quite intentional. Look at these. What do they prefer to look at? Not the checkerboard. Take a look here. The baby often, and in fact, we know from the work of Heidi Lassal's, it's the baby who elicits the behavior of the parent. It's not the parent who actually often may be, but the baby has the capacity to really elicit, to draw in the parent or the caregiver, as seen in these beautiful pictures. Newborns can hear. People weren't sure babies could hear, but Michael Wertheimer showed that newborns could orient towards the sound as early as at 10 minutes of age. But what do babies prefer to listen to? I mean, we know now from research that babies prefer the voice of the parent, can actually recognize the mother's voice. clearly from the experience in utero. There's a real continuity between the baby's auditory experiences in utero and the baby's experiences postnatally. In this case, during the NB or Newborn Behavioural Observation session, we said the dad calling the baby's name and the baby turning to the dad. Look at the mom's face. These are moments of, if you like, meeting, moments of introduction, of confirmation in terms of the relationship between, in this case, the dad and this little baby. We know about smell and touch, that newborns can locate a smell and they prefer the smell of some smells to others. For example, the smell of the mother's milk prefer to other smells. But because the sensory cortex is most developed at birth, baby's sensitivity to touch is exquisitely developed at this time. Those of you who are involved in massage therapy following the work of Tiffany Field will know what I mean. Or babies who are in the neonatal intensive care unit to experience kangaroo care, skin-to-skin contact, the effect this has on making the baby, helping the baby organize himself or herself. And close physical contact, such as breastfeeding, allow mother and infant to recognize each other through smell as well as touch. We know that babies can imitate. Again, at this time, Andrew Meltzoff reported that human infants as young as 42 minutes of age could imitate facial expressions that they observed in adults. I wasn't impressed by this for a long time, that babies could stick out their tongues, but I think I failed to realize the capacity of the baby to recognize a facial expression, the capacity for observation, to be able to distinguish between different facial expressions, in this case, tongue thrusting and without the tongue thrusting. And of course, now we know much more that babies can distinguish different facial expressions. And as a result of expectations for interaction. Look at this baby on the left, certainly is involved in a mutual interactive session with the caregiver. Whereas the baby on the right from Ed Tronick's still face paradigm, that when the mother presents a still face, the baby is disturbed because the baby has an expectation for a smiling, available mother. And this is a sort of a violation, I should say, of his expectation. So babies, if you like, have expectations. They remember. Do they remember is the question I think we could know now, because we often ask, can babies remember these early experiences? Well, they may not have explicit autobiographical memories, but they have what we call implicit memory, more of an unconscious emotional recollection. And really it's this kind of emotional, almost subconscious memory that babies that make a difference. Am I safe? Is the world a good place? Do I have people around me? Is my mom, my dad, are they all available? So the brain's memory systems are deeply intertwined with its emotional circuits. So much so we can learn early on in an emotional understanding of how the baby has an emotional understanding of how the world works. And these become better in the baby's psyche, so to speak. So part of this too, around this time, was the whole work of people like Conrad Lorenz, following on Darwin's work, that babies are beautifully designed to elicit from the caregiver all the support they need for their survival and adaptation. The sight, the sound, the touch and smell of a baby draws us in turn towards the baby and ensures a steady source of food, protection, nurturance, and love for this baby. Indeed, if you like, summarizing this whole body of research, John Bowlby put it this way. He said, it's fortunate for their survival that babies are so designed by nature that they beguile and enslave mothers. He should have included fathers, of course, but the capacity to beguile and enslave their caregivers. Or as Selma Freiberg says, the baby stands for the renewal of self. The birth can be experienced as a psychological rebirth for the parents themselves. And into this vortex of discovery entered Barry Brazelton. And his observations began to realize he could see that even in sleep, babies were not just sleeping, they were able to actively screen, protect their sleep in the face of all sorts of environmental noise and stimulation. He learned that babies could visually track. But as we see in the picture of himself with this 2-day-old baby, that babies pay special attention to the human face. Babies can imitate, yes, but they can hear and locate sounds, but can recognize the mother's voice and smell, and can discriminate the mother's face from that of a stranger, and can recognize emotional expressions, the mother's or father's availability or non-availability. So for Berry, what he'd like us to know is that behavior is the baby's language. So the baby sits more than a catalogue of discrete behaviors. He maintains that newborn is not only competent, but is a fully responsive human being, a person with an individual personality. And that's what we want to access. Let's look at this film.
Now I'd like to know whether when he turns to my voice, he will also begin to search for my face. Can you turn over here if I talk to you? Can you turn over here if I talk to you? Can you turn over here if I...
The MBAS was developed half a century ago by American pediatrician Dr. Berry Brazelton. His formula was the first to go beyond testing for abnormalities by bringing out the best in the baby, the infant's strengths as well as its challenges.
He shows a typical response as I press the soles of his feet onto the bed.
The model met with skepticism early on. It took more than 2 decades before his work was published, and the medical community slowly began to accept his then revolutionary ideas. But Brazelton and his colleagues persevered. Now in his 80s, the pioneer pediatrician stays close to the cause. His colleague of many years, Kevin Nugent, sums up the scale this way.
It doesn't assess in that classic traditional term at all. It really just reveals a portrait of the baby that tells us, the caregiver, the parent, who he or she is. And if they could articulate it, they would say, this is what I can do.
A baby's behavior is his language. And if I have one thing I'd like to bring about by sharing a baby with a new parent, it's that you can trust that language.
Now
I just love that last sentence, you can trust that language. And I think that the whole philosophy of Berry Brazelton is that babies can initiate communication, that they have a motivation to engage, to make a connection with adults in their lives. And they're able to participate in lasting two-way exchanges or dialogues, as we see with this mom and the baby, in a virtual turn-taking. And of course, importantly for us is that we actually listen. During that turn-taking, we don't continually speak over the baby. We allow the baby to engage us, take time to listen, to respond to his or her cues. So it becomes a virtual turn-taking, which is the essence really of learning to love. And it was really Colin Trevarthen added to this understanding. He sees the baby as a storyteller, as capable of having proto-conversations with the caregiver. He calls this primary intersubjectivity, but it's about turn-taking chats and sharing emotional experience, that the baby is also trying to understand what the parent wants and needs. What are you saying? What do you want? So it's a shared other awareness between both. So the baby is listening for cues as the adult is listening for cues. So it's a mutual sort of, if you like, shared other awareness, as Vasu Reddy would say. Let's take a look at it here in this beautiful example of this 5-day-old baby, Maya.
Here's Maya at 5 days old. Even in a newborn, there are clear periods of intense concentration and social interaction. While brief, they occur many times throughout the day. Often the best time for interaction is around a feed. Here, Maya is not yet ready. She appears milk-drunk, sleepy and quiet. As she becomes more alert, she wants to interact, but her body needs to be still. She's too young to do it alone, so becomes distressed. Maya's mum comforts her with skin-to-skin contact. Maya's relaxed stillness communicates she's now content. With the support of loose wrapping and a hand under her head, Maya yawns. Yawns are often a sign of tiredness, but this time The yawn is a means of refocusing her attention. This lovely moment of mutual gaze is crucial for Maya's healthy brain development. Maintaining this focus is hard work. Maya gives herself little breaks by blinking and looking away. And even at 5 days of age, you may be rewarded with a smile.
Look at that.
After a few minutes of effort, a baby becomes tired. Increasing body movements and turning away communicate it's time to sleep. Now firmly wrapped, head cradled, Maya can comfortably drift off. This wonderful sequence of communication has happened all with the help of mum's concentrated attention.
It is very easy for people to miss it because you have to really look. I think you have to really be quiet and really be patient and try and look for it and be open for communication from them.
At 1 month.
Well, certainly, I hope you felt as I did, just amazed at the sensitivity of the mother to the baby, but also the degree to which the baby was responding to the mother's cues in that beautiful turn-taking engagement at just 5 days of age. So think of for the baby. All babies are trying to make sense of the world. If the baby could speak, I think she would say, I'm in a constant state of curiosity about the new world. I just want to make sense of it. Can you help me? Because everything is new. But what's constant? The baby wonders. But clearly, if the baby could speak, say, I especially want to know about you. I want to get to know you better. Because I love our conversations. I like to listen to you. And I know you listen to me and take me seriously. That's why we have such good conversations together. But I keep searching for what is in your thoughts and what you're thinking about. So the baby has intentions, goals, plans, hope, and even dreams. The baby wants to be loved, wants to be cared for, wants to enter into that sort of fulfilling, pleasurable interaction with the parents. But we have to acknowledge and accept that babies are, the beauty is they're actively engaged in their own development. The baby is both learner and teacher. And the baby, as Dr Brazelton would say, born for conversation, ready to be involved in storytelling. And babies are aware of other people's thoughts and wants. They have an emerging theory of mind. They are trying to see what's in your mind, trying to understand that. And that's the capacity for intersubjective sympathy. They're capable of emotional engagement. And babies have implicit memories of this experience in this period. Now, how do we facilitate this and make it happen? Let me just ask you, let's take a look at a few little babies here. What's this baby telling you, do you think? Just think, just look at everything there. Oh, the eyes, the mouth, the tilting of the head. Is this a look of interest, curiosity, pleasure? Let's take a look at this little girl. You can just see the curve of the mother's cheek in the foreground. So she's looking at her mother. The mother and self are conversing. What is the baby's body language telling us? Look at it all. The eyes, the mouth, the hands. What is she saying to her mother? What do you think? It's the same girl a few moments later. What is she saying? Is it the same expression or is it different? Just look at it. Just check the eyebrows, the widened eyes, the open mouth. Is she saying, just a second, hold it, please? Is it too much? I need time out, please. Is she on the verge of being overwhelmed, overstimulated? And yet for us, we pick up on that and say, oh, I see this is too much for you. And we back off. We respond to her cues. How about this little boy? Again, on his mother's shoulder. What's the language saying here? Look at the forehead, the eyes, the mouth, the body language. Check the eyes, the dimpled cheeks, the smooth forehead, nesting in the curve of the mother's shoulder. Is he saying, I like being cuddled. I like this. I like the way you hold me. I like the smell, the touch, the feel of this. That's the baby's language. How about here? The baby holding fingers, hand grasp. Maybe she's saying, look at my fingers and look at the pursed lips. I'm trying to hold on. I like to hold on. I like this being anchored in your hands. The whole sense of touch, and the effect this has on the baby's brain system and emotional well-being. How about this? Yes, I think you've got to say, is it a yawn? Or is it asking for a time out during an intense conversation? I was actually there at that moment when the great photographer Abelardo Morel, with whom I collaborated on the Your Baby is Speaking to You book, he captured this moment. And it was during a conversation, and the babies and mother were going back and forth. Suddenly the baby just pulled back and gave a big yawn. And it was clear it was a way of, if you like, breaking the intensity of the interaction. It was another example of a little timeout. This baby, well, I think we all know what's happening here. Look at the hands, look at the mouth, the color, all these cues, even without a sound, you know this baby is in distress. How about here? Hand to mouth, beautiful fencer-like position. But means we have to marvel at the motor coordination that allowed him to get his hand in his mouth. But he's showing us, I'm not helpless. I can actually regulate myself. I can even sometimes calm myself, console myself. And how about this little fellow here, looking at the mother? What's in his mind? What's he trying to say to us? Well, this isn't a full social smile, but look at the mouth is open. Look at the eyes. Corners of the mouth are pulled back, and we used to call a simple smile. But it really, we now know it's more of a smile of discovery. As if the baby is saying, it's you. I know that face. I know that expression. It's a remarkable milestone, and the social smile will follow soon. But you see this certainly in the first few weeks of life. So our task really is to try to understand what's happening in babies' minds and how they feel. What is my baby thinking? What are they trying to tell us? What's going on in their minds? Can they understand what we think? Can we read their minds? That, I think, is the big challenge. Luckily for us, they have a wide range of stunningly precocious cues to tell us that. But the key stance for us is being curious. I think I speak more to myself and for all of us practitioners. It's so important we approach babies with a sense of authentic humility. I mean, I've seen hundreds, maybe thousands of babies in my life, but if I were to meet you and your baby, I'd have to admit, firstly, with humility, I know nothing about your baby. Together, we can really try to learn something about your baby. I come open and curious. And I have to say, with a sense of privilege. Even after all these years, I still have butterflies in my stomach when I hold a baby, somebody else's baby, when I have the privilege of holding somebody else's baby in my own hands. Because I know I'm at a great moment in that baby's life, a moment that will never come back. So I approach it with humility and a sense of privilege, but also with, as you say here, in terms of developing this Baby Communications Awareness Week, how do we put ourselves into the baby's shoes? I want to know who this baby is. What is this baby telling me? That's why we use the Newborn Behavioural Observation system, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but it's important to be emotionally engaged. We can't do this in any objective way. This is a person we're interacting with, and we have to be full of respectful regard and curiosity, and what I'd call empathic attunement to both the baby and the family, acknowledging and trying to understand what the parents want us to know about themselves, opening ourselves to them, making them feel safe, trusted, respected, and valued. So we approach the parents, and like I said to you as parents, not as a teacher, but as a student, with you trying to learn from this baby. The baby will teach us. So in this case, we have my colleague, Connie Kiefer, listening to the baby's story, a privileged moment for clinicians. So the Newborn Behavioural Observation System, to summarize, is really a tool we use to help parents become more aware of the baby's capacities, but above all, the baby's individuality, the baby's individual style, if you like. It's the question of not so much what my little baby can do, but who my baby is. How can I get to know him? So we use this baby's behavior, we observe the baby together to strengthen the relationship between the parents and the infant, with a view to promoting a positive relationship between the parent and baby and between us and the family. Now let me take a look and give you an example of this with our colleague Susan Nicolson in Melbourne.
The Newborn Behavioural Observations system is a very simple but really quite powerful way for clinicians from a whole array of different backgrounds and settings, workplace settings, to help parents with their very new baby and up to the age of 3 months to get to know their baby well. We're talking about, as clinicians, helping parents really start to notice the nuances of baby behaviour, the slight shifts in the baby's state from, say, deep sleep to light sleep to doziness to quiet alert, fussiness and active crying, helping them read the baby's state and be able to appropriately respond. So in a way that will build the parent's confidence. It'll also likely build the relationship between you as a clinician and the family. And that's always important when we're working with vulnerable families. But I would argue that the NBO is useful for just ordinary, everyday families. I think it's very unlikely that there will be a family who would get nothing out of spending 15 minutes with you as a clinician, just with you together, observing their baby and directly interacting with the baby as a person, responding to what the baby's saying in the moment, and learning what makes a difference to their baby if they're upset, what helps them settle if they've been unsettled or fussy, and what gives their baby some pleasure or helps their baby to stay calm, then to open their eyes and be ready to be curious about their social world. I think that's the real reward of the Newborn Behavioural Observation System.
I hope you were as inspired as I am by Susan's use of the Newborn Behavioural Observation System. And this picture by Mia captures it all. We're setting the foundations for this. This gets Mia the first step, building the baby's confidence up, helping parents get to know their baby so that the baby becomes valued as a person and internalize the sense of trustworthiness, if you like, sense that he or she is lovable, worthy of love, is trustworthy, and has that sense of confidence and autonomy that allows them to walk out into the big wide world, if you like, and make their impact there. So I hope this was helpful to you for the first few minutes I spent with you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the week, and this would make some contribution to your understanding of your baby, whether you're a parent or a practitioner. So thank you very much for spending this time with me. And again, thanks to Sarah Lamb and Inga Nicholas for inviting me here today. Bye-bye now, and thank you very, very much.